All right, friends. So, hello. Um, Today's video, or the video that I want to make today, is really going to touch on a fundamental question that I heard a lot, um, uh, when the protocol launched, and I hear the same question a lot throughout DeFi, which is where does the yield come from? And in Lazy Summer Protocol, that question actually has two meanings, which we're going to touch on both. So, first, in DeFi, generally speaking, yield is generated through some type of borrowing activity. So, somebody wants to borrow assets, and and the lender is willing to lend out their assets. In many cases, their stable coins, for a specific rate. And within the many different protocols, there are different levels of risk, and the type of assets that you're willing to lend against are quite different. For example, in Morpho, there are many different vaults in that respect. Same in Euler, and then in something like Aave, you're getting a whole sort of kind of mixed bag, basically. Now, that's really the general source of the yield. And now, of course, there are many different types of quality and collateral quality when it comes to this notion of lending. But there's also farming, for example, like let's say the Sky rewards, where users can deposit USDS and earn Sky, previously MKR, rewards for depositing their USDS stablecoin. And so those are the two very broad ways. There's also LPing, for example, in something like Uniswap v4. So there are many different ways to earn yield in DeFi. But generally speaking, it comes down to farming some type of token reward or earning some type of interest rate for lending your assets to somebody who wants to borrow them for whatever purpose, where they think they can either earn a higher return than they're paying you, or they have some immediate liquidity need that they're willing to pay for over time. So those are the real general sources of where at least the sustainable yield is coming from in DeFi, but that can vary a lot. How do you know the quality of it? How do you know all of these different questions, if it's sustainable, all of these different things. Like, for example, we can go to Morpho and look at some of these different strategies. Like, let's see, for USDC, and you have a bunch of different strategies. So that just goes to show the different. You see the collateral here, and you can see all of this detail around the risk and stuff like that, generally speaking, and how these yielding strategies are, or how these yields are generated differently from one another. Now, that's really interesting, but still it's difficult to make those decisions on your own, one versus the other, and that's really the power of the Lazy Summer Protocol, which is to say, the same question applied to the Lazy Summer Protocol has, as I said, two parts to it. Not just where the yield is coming from in DeFi, but where's the yield coming from the underlying yield sources within the Lazy Summer Protocol. So if we look into let's say USDC on mainnet, because it has a lot of the broad strokes options, within the Lazy Summer Protocol, it's all about the highest quality yield sources. So that is really about, we're going to have to wait for this to load here just a second, which is great. And yeah, so it's all about the highest quality yield sources. So you can see here that these are all lending, some variation of lending yield sources, and meaning that, you know, some borrower is paying these rates, and that yield is being passed on to you know, the people who deposited their assets, obviously. Now, within the lazy summer protocol, how are these selected? Why is it these, you know, I think it's probably around 15 or 20 here. Why is it these 15 or 20? And, you know, how is it decided that these are the ones? And this is where it's really fascinating from a perspective of the protocol, where there's a third-party risk curator. So similar to how all of these strategies, or on at least Euler and Morpho, have risk curators of their own who have their different strategies. We have, you know, or the protocol has a higher level sort of risk curator that's saying, okay, these strategies are really great for these few reasons, and a few different things that are taken into account when thinking about these different strategies is a few different things: liquidity, the quality of the collateral, for example, just to name a couple of things, which we'll do a deeper dive into all of the different attributes at a later time. But just, you know, wanted to create this video to really help people understand the reason why that these are the yield sources is that they're the highest quality yield sources from the highest quality protocols. And this is the USDC lower risk, so it's really the best of the best in terms of getting those optimized yields. So just to recap, yield sources in DeFi, where is the yield coming in DeFi? Just generally speaking, it's usually coming from lending, it's usually coming from some type of token farming, or generally speaking, it's coming from some type of LPing where you're getting trading fees and stuff like that. But then that has so many different options, so it's hard to make a decision there. But when it comes to the lazy summer protocol, the protocol makes it a lot easier, where you just have a few options, but then you have to say to yourself, well, why and where are these yield sources coming from within the, you know, the lazy summer protocol and their different vaults. And that question is really answered by saying, you know, depending on the specific vault, it's a higher level of diligence to say these are really the best of the best strategies within a specific protocol, and also not just giving exposure to only one protocol, but giving a diverse exposure to many different protocols and many different risk curators. So yeah, that's what I always love to say about the yield sources in the lazy summer protocol. Depending on what approach you want to take and what asset you want to use, you're really getting the best yields, the best strategies from the best protocols automatically without having to do anything. So it's really a great world to be in.